Hello, hello. So, do I look invisible? Thank you. It's interesting because they were like, you can't wear black clothes, and all my clothes is black. And so I thought, well, it'd be cool because if I look invisible, I'm going to talk about invisible economy anyway, but it didn't work out. But the thing is that if you think about it in terms of society, and we have all these arbitrary rules that someone decided and you standardized, and it doesn't take into account the singularity of everyone. And my work with data has a lot to do with building a community that has no rules, no sanctions, but that there is a healthy community, there is a community that respects and nurtures our uniqueness and our difference. So I'm going to tell you a story, not about your typical NFT story of the artist that came, found NFTs, and became successful and bought a house, because I was already successful. I did all these things, and I already had a house. So I was interested in something else, and my story is a story about how I realized after 20 years of working and doing all these creative projects, how I realized that all my time, all my love, all my talent was put into projects that were great, but actually meaningless, and that I believe art transforms you, and none of these projects ever had any impact on me. And so I became an artist in the most unexpected way through data. And I think it was at the first Rare Art Fest that I gave a vision of data that wasn't from the CEO perspective, but more from the artist perspective. And so I think art is a fundamental human need to really for self-expression and to connect profoundly with other people. And I realized that everything that I had done before was just product. And so art, for me, involves the sublimation of your fears, your repressed desires, your shadow side. And this is, I think, what we do on data. So this is data. It's a place where people speak to each other through drawings, and every panel is made by a different person. And you can see it's very simple. You go in there, we have a shitty tool. Everybody uses the same shitty tool, and you add to the conversation, and people make beautiful things. And so what is really beautiful about it is that these are strangers all over the world who are different backgrounds, different socioeconomic status, gender, age, and we are all doing collaborative art together, and all of them are motivated intrinsically with no expectations of remuneration. And so there are thousands of these conversations on data, and it's an open platform. It's completely open. There is no censorship of any kind. We don't have flagging, blocking, anything like that, and it's a community in which there is no bullying or trolling. And so, in a world of toxic social media and inequality, war, suffering, I strongly believe that creating this type of beauty is subversive. And so it had actually an impact on me personally. I was always very professional. I was really a good CEO because I was equanimous and always maintain my emotions aside. But then all of a sudden, with data, all of those boundaries started to disappear, and this users were no longer the users, were my friends. And so at the Rare Fest, I talked about going to Chile and visiting three of the data artists, Cromo, Otro Captori, and Boris. They didn't know each other. We all met then, and we started like just drawing together on parks and cafes. And I realized by seeing how they lived, they were living, the artist life, but also the struggling artist life, right? They were paying that cost. And it really had an impact in me, and this is the catalyst when we decided to go into figuring out how to make this community sustainable, self-sustainable. But the problem is, like, how do you put money into a community that is so collaborative and so creative without destroying the very thing that makes it like that? And so we were wondering if somebody like Raul, who was 75 years old back then, if we could generate some basic income, universal basic income for artists so that he could do his comics without any pressure to produce. And that's how we got to blockchain. We launched our first collection in 2017, right after CryptoPunks, right before CryptoKitties. This is an important historical collection for many reasons. But one of the reasons for me, this is, apart from a few artists, these are the first artists in the world to tokenize art on Ethereum. A lot of them are from Latin America and from rural places in Peru and Chile and Mexico. And another important innovation that we did with this contract was actually very close to me. Like, the reason behind it was very personal. And it's that on those 20 years working from MTV and Disney and Coca-Cola and all these big names, I actually ended up with none of the intellectual rights of all the work I produced in 20 years. And so, because the personal is political, the Croods and Weirdos introduced for the first time royalties encoded, automatically encoded in the smart contracts for artists back in 2017. But it was that early that I actually started seeing the problems with speculative markets and all this fad with the CryptoKitties. And so we move on pretty quickly from NFTs before they were called NFTs, and start really getting into token economics, understanding the market structures, incentives, to really see if we could build an alternative system that was completely different from what we know. And after all I know, all I can say after all these years, really going deep into it, and forgive me if I'm blunt, but for me, anyone that says that the NFT market is good for artists is either out of wishful thinking or playing hypocrisy. We really need to see the evidence and do something about it. So in May 2018, I was already talking about the problems of speculation and all these things, and our artists were feeling it too. So somebody like Serste, who says that data is her warm bath, she was like, well, if the money from the Croods and Weirdos is going to change the experience I have in data, which for me is priceless, I don't want the money. So by 2019, we're in the middle of the crypto winter. We had no money, no team, but we had a lot of friends in the crypto art ecosystem, and we were invited to all these events. And so we decided to do a bunch of experiments in economics, in incentives, at every event. And basically, it was the community with us doing it. And so for the first NFT NYC conference, we launched Discontrol. It was the first visual conversation we tokenized. It was one-on-ones at 150 150, you remember, Jason? 150, and everybody was like, why so expensive? And you were one of them, I remember. And so on Radical Markets, we actually tested a channel auction. Hasn't been tested before. It's an auction mechanism. And people were bidding at an artwork that didn't exist, that was being made live as people were bidding by artists all over the world. We also did an experiment on display, this immersive installation with the work of Maria Garcia, and part of it was also a provocation. This was for Kadaf to put the work of Maria Garcia, which is this incredibly expressive artist, self-taught artist from a little town in Venezuela, next to artists that have been in museums or sell for $1 million, and people actually loved it. And we did a live joint performance at the Serial Summit, in which we had 20 artists around the world making this collaborative conversation live throughout the event that ended up in an auction. And here's an experiment in incentives and social norms. We tokenized this conversation and gifted to the crypto art community for the Red Art Fest too. And you know, social norms is like when you're in a buffet and you're with friends, you don't eat all the food of the buffet, right? You live for your friends. But here, one collector actually snatched up like half of it. And it was interesting because he was actually operating under market norms in which you take all for yourself. And we also experimented with artificial intelligence. We created DataGAN in collaboration with Alex Reben, an artist and roboticist. And the model was trained out of 100,000 drawings on data. So we learned to generate drawings out of all of our work. And then artists will respond on data to DataGAN. They still do today. And the last, this was another first. Mokta invited us to present DataGAN and do a live drawing performance at the Tate Modern in New York, and in London. And this was the first time crypto art NFTs were ever featured in a major museum. This is November 2019. And in collaboration with Super Rare, we actually tokenize all the work related to it. And these are Ilan and Lenata. They came from Berlin to hang out with us at the Tate, but ended up like helping us with all the installations and all the stuff. And this is, they paid for the trip and everything. And this is, to me, it shows what the community did for the entire year. Everybody did this. Everybody did it for the joy of it, to be part of it, all motivated by intrinsic rewards. And I think that was the year in which the company transitioned into what we call now Data Collective. Like, we've been decentralized ever since. But that 2019 was also an important, as everything that I just showed you was happening, another thing was also happening. And around February, Judy, my partner in crime, told me that she had seen this documentary. She was like, I just saw this documentary about Ted Bundy and reminded me of you. Casually. But a week later, Otro Captore, who is also dear to my heart, told me, don't get me wrong, but I just saw this documentary about this serial killer. So it's funny for them, see? But to me, it was like it's almost like if you see yourself in the mirror and that image simply shatters and it's on the floor. And I really, for the first time in my life, didn't know who I was. And all that process took me into confronting the man that sexually abused me when I was 4 or 5 years old. And these are the drawings I made the days before and after I confronted him. And the thing is that, well, I understood that I'm not a psychopath. It's actually that ability to distance myself from emotions that was so great for a CEO. It's actually out of defense mechanisms that developed when I was a kid. But it's actually a magical thing when you have to go back and reconstruct yourself after that. It's a really interesting process. And this is the context in which I started writing the Invisible Economy paper. And by the time I finished the paper, the whole world was in its own moment of shock and reckoning, because we were in the middle of the pandemic, and all these things were happening. So the only project that we launched in 2020 was No Justice, No Peace, in which we leveraged the global and decentralized nature of the data collective and used the blockchain as a medium, basically, as a medium of protest. And so we created all these NFTs out of the police officers who have killed unarmed black people, because we realized that there was a wall of silence around these police officers. So all these tokens, they cannot, thank you. They cannot be traded. They live in the wallets of the victims of these crimes, and they cannot be censored or taken down. And so by June, we presented the Invisible Economy paper. Basically, the main insight is that, and this is research of decades, is that at the moment that you replace intrinsic rewards by extrinsic expected rewards, the intrinsic rewards disappear, diminish or disappear, and it hampers creativity and sometimes even kills it. So for us, our hypothesis was, well, in order to protect the intrinsic rewards of people and the intangible values, the economy needs to be invisible, meaning a radical separation from our making to the market. And to test our hypothesis, we couldn't just raise money and hire people, right? We had to do it the way we thought, by people contributing by intrinsic rewards. And we started these working groups with very different themes, like governance, system model, contribution metrics, trying to define what will be the invisible economy. And well, it's been 2 years that we're doing this, almost 2 years that we've been doing these sessions, hours and hours every week, with people of all kinds. And I never worked with so many incredible and brilliant people, all of them working motivated by intrinsic rewards. No one in the last 3 years have been paid for any of the work and value we created with data. And so the other thing is that it's a very safe space. And so our governance model is not top-down, it's not bottom-up, it's something different. It resembles the visual conversations. And we have a very diverse community. So we have Joe who is a pastor, and we have Angie, who was a punk in the 70s, and everything in between. And so it's not about all of us agreeing on everything. We don't need to reach consensus. It's really about at a particular moment, when you're looking at something within a particular context and with the information that we have, if that feels right. And so it's a lot of intuition and a lot of deliberation. We can hear different aspects, different views, and until it doesn't feel right, we don't go there. And so we also realized that after 8 months working, we had basically defined the fundamentals of a very complex system without putting a vote or making a formal decision once. And one of the biggest issues was, how do you actually measure intrinsic rewards and intangible values. How do you can't have a leaderboard with like who is more generous or who is like contributing for more love. So we understood that we don't need to measure it, that all we need to do is represent it and make it visible within the system, and then you can start accounting for that value. And so here's our system model. It's basically made to protect creativity, to protect the intrinsic rewards of people, and it's a system made with an economy made with no economist in our group, because I think experts can't really innovate because they're too invested in their own conventions. And so I think, economies are really about how we relate to each other. And so as long as we can be truthful to that, and we have imagination, and artists have a lot of imagination, we can make systems like this. It's working. This is not theory. This is something that we're living every day. And so our ground truth is we all have the same universal needs. If we create the environment, like the data environment, in which you can fulfill those needs by intrinsic rewards, then the action in itself is your reward, and it's at the same time the contribution to the community. And so an example of the invisible economy will be Regrow, which is a project by Serste. Remember Serste? Serste from Italy and Simon from Kenya. Because as a community, we were looking for ways to minimize our environmental impact, and they were farmers, so they were already experimenting with different regenerative models. And so what we're doing now, other data we call data kin, the people on data, other data kin are joining, and what we're doing is flowing value to Regrow, and value is not just money, but includes money, but it's not just money. We flow in value to Regrow, which means that it's not data greenwashing. It's not just us donating some money. It's our artists having a direct action and the entire community supporting those efforts. And so we felt that we had it very clear until this happened. So the Crips and Widows we didn't sell them, or they were out of the market, and all of a sudden an NFT archaeologist found a backdoor to buy them, and on a Sunday there were hundreds and hundreds of people buying the Crips and Widows, which forced us to actually deal back again with the market. And well, now we have an incredible community of collectors. The NFT archaeologist actually is a wonderful data kin. But we also had to deal with the toxicity of the market, because the Crips and Widows are actually, because of our experimental nature, actually a very complex project, and the market doesn't understand complexity. So they were accusing us as scam, as pulling the rug, as how do I sell this soccer, and and so what we did was basically what we always do. We in Dreamverse, because the Crips and Widows are part of the Metaverse collection. We created a live painting that started with the word scam and then painted over with irreverence and playfulness and colors. And so for the first anniversary of the ape storm, we swapped the toxic apes for, as Judy says, real, beautiful, majestic African apes. So we adopted 300 apes from Action Africa, and the things that we go beyond donation, right? We want to help them see if we can help them create a more sustainable, mechanics for them, but also to learn from them, because some datakin are already thinking about creating sanctuaries of animals as part of Regrow. And so Today, chromo autograptorian bodies, they actually have safety, financial safety for years to come, and they did not have to go on Twitter and shield. They never had to do any marketing. They never had to do any selling. The money just came. They did what they love, and that's what the invisible economy is supposed to do. And Raul is getting, as a pilot program, is getting a UBI every month, no strings attached. Even though, they all still contribute to that as before. And basically, this is all the value we have created in the last years. When you see the yellow and the blue, that's value. When you see the pink, that's innovation, which is like triple the value. And as you can see, in the last 3 years, we've made more innovation than ever before. All of this by people contributing by intrinsic rewards. And the thing is that this is now volunteering, because what we really did was creating wealth together. This is collective wealth, and now we're doing an exit to community so that we can start distributing this ownership to the entire community. And the company, which still exists, will transition into the DAO. And it's a protocol run by smart contracts, and then it has an interface to the invisible economy, which protects creativity, people, relationships, and so on. And so I just end by saying that these are the hills. We call the hills, the first hill is the system that is optimized for money. That's the market. The invisible economy is optimized for protection of intrinsic rewards and intangible values. And we already see that there is a third hill in which art doesn't have to be commoditized at all, in which people doesn't have to be commoditized, in which we don't even have to have that link to the market anymore. We don't really know how to get there, but we can see it, and we're leaving blockchain to work on holochain, because the holochain community, I think, have some of those clues. And so what I will end up is, it's about collective mindset shift. It's about transformation. And I went from being a psychopath, happy CEO dressing in color to an activist that only wears black, because because if you think about it, what I learned is that we're not only good and we're not only bad. We have to, it doesn't serve us just to see all the good things and deny the shadows. I think the best that we can do for the world is to take a hard look at ourselves, see what we got, do something creative with it. That's what art does, right? We need to be vulnerable enough, truthful enough, courageous enough to make something really beautiful. Thank you.